I think failure, unfortunately, chooses people's paths before they choose a path. Hello, everybody. You have found Through a Therapist's Eyes. This is December the 15th. We're in the middle of the holiday season. I hope things are going well for you, that you're coping, getting through a tough time that is for many. But Merry Christmas in this holiday season. We have Kasie out. My gosh, I was out like last week. You should be out, Miss Victoria. How you doing, dear?
I'm good. I mean, it's a little muffled with the double ear infection, but you know.
Gosh, it is everywhere. John, you're the healthy one of the crew.
That's right, and I'm the old one of the crew. But because I've had every disease you could possibly have,
you don't get sick.
I don't get sick anymore.
I look forward to those days.
Yes, indeed. I don't get sick very ever much at all either, but dang, it did. It got me. So we are going to be talking about, hello, I just kicked the camera, Neil. He gets so frustrated with my squirming, y'all. So we're talking about failure today. And the three questions I'm thinking about that I want you to ponder as we discuss is, what does failure mean to you? In your mind, what is the result, really, of the failure? Like, really, what is next? And that's the two questions that I did, because I didn't do three. How about that?
Yeah.
God, we are out of sorts. So this is the human emotional experience. We really do endeavor to figure this thing out together. You get personal insights directly from therapists in here, personal time in your car and home, knowing it's not the delivery of therapy services in any way. So contact at throughatherapist'seyes.com is where we get good feedback from you to interact. We do the Facebook Live. We're adding YouTube maybe sometime in the beginning of the new year, and that's going to be fun projects. Keep in mind we have some cool things coming out with the Through a Therapist's Eyes tribe. You got the book that I'm writing on marriage. Have I said that out loud yet?
Yes, you have.
I did. I didn't say the topic, though.
Yeah, you did. You said it was on marriage, yeah.
Oh, okay. And also a course that we're doing, a video experience that I'm super excited about. So I'm just going to pop that out there for your awareness to begin looking for some cool things down the pipes. I think that we're going to do a current event to start off the show, though, and we're all three going to get pissed off.
Okay.
Probably. If it's the same thing you mentioned to me earlier today.
It is.
You didn't mention that to me.
It is.
Well, because you weren't here at 7 a.m. this morning like I was.
I wasn't here at 7 a.m. either. Let's point that out. I was kind of astounded at this reality that came to me. And I wasn't sure if I was going to do a current event or not on it. And then I was doing show prep, and I saw this article that was out there that caught my eye that was related to this issue where, listen, a friend of mine needed inpatient care for her son. And simply put, she couldn't get it.
Yeah.
Just couldn't get it.
Exactly.
And this is specifically for adolescent kids. So this article that I found I thought was interesting. Where was it from? Lack of access to evidence-based mental health care poses grave threat. The American Medical Association was talking about this. So some of the highlights from this article that's on our show notes, so you can catch this. There's clearly a mental health crisis cited and added, and really predated COVID, but COVID has added to it in tremendous
COVID
fashion.
has added exponentially.
Right.
Yeah.
And I maintain that this crisis that people are talking about, people love crisis and all this kind of stuff, really began when we closed down mental health centers back in the early 90s and late 90s, really. But just if we need any evidence to the mental health crisis that people are saying, if you'd be willing to share, Victoria, you shared another unrelated to this current event that sort of bothered you or hurt your heart, if you will.
Oh, about the passing of
Yes.
So his name was Stephen Twitch Boss. He was got his start on like So You Think You Can Dance. A really talented dancer. And then he became the DJ for the Ellen DeGeneres show, and later became like an executive producer of the show and all this stuff. And he's 40 years old, and they found him in a hotel room Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and he from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Yeah. And I think it's just been weighing kind of really heavy on my heart and a lot of other hearts, is because, like, it's such a real thing. Like, you see this person that just like illuminates light and joy and, like, happiness. Like, he had just posted a dancing video like 2-3 days ago.
Wow,
like,
right.
And there's like, and like, so you have all this like video evidence of saying like happiness and 3 beautiful kids, a beautiful wife, a loving family. Yeah.
It's the
image. So that's, I think, a really, just as a therapist, I think that's just way hard that, like, a lot of times people don't reach out for help, or they're afraid to reach out for help, or they're, they do, but sometimes,
yeah.
And you never really know what is going on behind the phone, behind the camera, behind the scenes in a person's life.
And we've begun to become aware of the realities that mental health has been so in the forefront. And I'm excited about that. But this current event, which matches with, my recent event and observation, where this kid was 16 years old, needing to be inpatient facility. The acuity of their care needs were based on self-harm or, dangerousness, which goes to the level of inpatient care. And so they're reaching out, and they sit in the emergency room for like days, because there's no beds available. And I actually reached out to a friend of mine who does placements and told me essentially that this blows my mind, no facilities close to us. The closest place that you can now get, I am told, for an inpatient adolescent unit.
Is it Raleigh?
Reno, Nevada.
Reno, Nevada.
John?
Unbelievable.
Keep in mind that we are in Gaston County, North Carolina.
This is to the other
near
Charlotte.
Near Charlotte.
This is to the other shining sea.
Oh my!
In our country. I don't even have a category for that.
Yeah.
A month ago, they shut their facility down because insurance companies will not pay for care after 30 days, and the acuity is just too high, and so these facilities cannot function.
They're having a hard time stabilizing their patients, inpatient.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there are no facilities. And
it's not from the point of view, there's no open beds.
That
which
used
is what
to be the problem.
Used to be the problem, is that they all the beds were full.
That's what we talked about this morning.
Yeah, and now it's shifted to there literally just are no beds because there is no facility to even just house the beds.
Cannot understand it.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
What about personnel? That's also something that's playing.
You're right. So, John, I don't know if you cheated and checked the article, but let me get back to it. So the AMA is talking about you. What's that?
I did cheat.
Oh, you did cheat
a little bit.
Okay,
but I'm also aware that there's a lack of psychiatrists.
There's a massive lack of psychiatrists, and so the AMA is talking about possible solutions explored. 1, you can increase the size of the mental health workforce. Okay. 2, create more residency slots in psychiatry. Okay. 3, primary care physicians are important and substantial contributors to screening for and addressing conditions. That's a quote. And they say 70% of all care visits, including a behavioral health component. It just makes me like, that means you go to your family doctor, y'all, and 70% of the time, there's a mental health factor in that primary care's office. Okay. This next one, listen closely to this, Victoria and John.
Yes, okay.
Because I don't even know what I'm about to say as part of the AMA's description here. I don't know what this is. Okay. They're part of their process of solutions for this issue. Payers and policymakers must act urgently to ensure primary care physicians and their care teams have the support they need to provide coordinated, equitable care for their patients and families, including long-term sustainable funding for training and education for physician practices on implemental BHI limiting harmful health plan utilization, management and review practices for integrative services, and improving insurer network adequacy. John, does that make any sense to you? Seriously.
I don't know what that means.
I was going to say, this looks like a bunch of gibberish to me.
Yeah, it's double speak.
Yeah.
You need a translator
Yeah. I
to
have
do that.
no idea what that means.
I mean, here's my thing. The reality is, for goodness sakes, we do not have services now in place because there hasn't been funding for the services that are necessary.
Goes back a long ways.
It does. It does. But when we left the insane asylums, John, that's what we used to call them, insane asylums. They were used to be called asylums, and the public added the word insane asylums in the 50s and 60s in these horrible treatment facilities. We
a lot of horror movies.
They're the topic of a lot of horror movies. We figured out that we needed to release them to the community into community mental health center systems. And we had all kinds of wraparound services that were paid for, John. They got way better. This is in the 80s. When I came in the 90s, they were really in place. Robust wraparound, case management, developmental disability, substance abuse services, adult adolescent. We were doing med management. We were doing crisis intervention. We were doing, all sorts of different medication management. I mean, all these things.
Multi-layered
Day treatment. Treatment where kids go to school all day long with us to do. And dadgummit, man. What are we getting, draconian now?
Yeah.
Where we don't even have this stuff now.
30 years later, there's nothing. It seems like.
And insurance companies need regulated to be forced to pay. I'm going to get really ticked off if I keep on with this, so I'm going to get us off of this.
We might need to take a deep breath.
You're going to hear something from your insurance.
You know what? Then call me because we
Yeah.
can chat. I am so appalled that I have a friend that has a 16-year-old that needs care and literally can't get it.
I mean, I told you about this morning about the student that I had at the elementary school that I was at who desperately needed day treatment because intensive in-home would not have done anything for this child, and desperately needed day treatment. And because day treatment is so heavily Medicaid funded and focused, like really you need to have Medicaid to go to day treatment.
If you have Medicaid, you can get all sorts of treatment.
Right.
Actually, I will point that out.
And so, but this student did not have Medicaid. I can't even remember what insurance her dad was on at the time.
You're at a disadvantage if you have insurance.
And
I'd agree about that.
Yeah,
and
you're at a disadvantage, man.
Yeah, so therefore I was not able, there was not even a point of me even submitting a referral to day treatment for this kid because she wouldn't have been accepted. And then if she would have, it would have been hundreds and hundreds of dollars a day out of pocket if you wanted to pay for that.
Right.
So,
and John, I'll go a little further with you in the sense too that there is a new reality that has developed in the last 10 to 15 years that I suspect, and I'll make the bold approach, and I've already ticked off and fired up.
Nah.
You know why there's not any psychiatrists available? I'll tell you why I think there's not many psychiatry services available, because they don't want to deal with insurance companies, and therefore they've done cash practices pretty much across the daggone board, and you have psychiatry that sees somebody for 15 to 20 minutes in an initial interview, and then you have 10-minute med checks thereafter, and that's the service system that you have.
Exactly.
Unfortunately,
and they don't really do. In my understanding, an adequate case of diagnosis because you only got them for 15 minutes.
20 minutes. What are you going to do?
You don't do an interview. You don't, basically.
Yeah.
they're not doing an assessment like how we do. It take an hour plus long time to talk to somebody, figure out what they're,
So I'm going to calm myself down, but I think that I'm going to end this little depressing segment of current event with the inadequate care for adolescent units and say we're going to have to come together as a community here. And I don't know, sorry for the around the world listeners, honestly, I don't know what system delivery really looks like in other countries. I'm going to say I'm completely ignorant, and I'm sorry for that. just don't talk to enough people in other countries yet. But I would love to hear from you.
I was going to say,
I
if
would,
they,
I would
yeah,
love
if,
to hear
if
about it.
comment and tell us what mental health practices are like where you're from.
Because here in the States, we are going to have to get serious about funding what is evidently well known to be a mental health crisis,
And
through grants and services and regulating insurance companies for these payments.
And I think there's a real lack of training of medical personnel. I mean, the primary care, you said something. It was like 70%, did you say? Of people
70% of
70%,
visits
yeah.
visits
have a mental
something.
health component.
How much
Per the
training? How much training
Not
do
much.
physicians have and PAs and nurse practitioners have in mental health? Well, I know it's very little.
I've
It's very
trained
little.
them.
You've
Yeah.
trained them, and you're very good at training them.
Yeah, thank you.
And
But,
I was just-
but
my-
that's not a major part of a rotation.
No.
And I mean, I come
them.
from a company who is very prominent in doing integrative healthcare, where they're integrating behavioral health providers in with the medical.
Yes.
So I think in that aspect, with the company that I come from, I do feel like they have slightly. I mean, obviously, there is obviously more training that can always be done, but I do feel like they have somewhat more of an understanding because they're working more day to day with the behavioral health providers.
Thank you for making me happier, Victoria.
But
You're right.
then at the
That's
same
true.
time, though, that's not. That's one
It's-
company.
It's beginning.
and so,
well,
and,
it's not one company across.
and I
the,
do know other companies are doing it, but
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there is some hope in that aspect, but it does all come down to like what happens when the behavioral health provider is out for the day.
Well, but
what happened,
furthermore,
and
to
so
bring us back, if I can, to the issue of inpatient care, we are integrating behavioral health professionals in medical groups around the country at a pretty quick rate, which is really, really, really cool. I want to really highlight that. But that does absolutely nothing for the current event
It does,
where
yeah.
people are needing
You're right.
inpatient, high acuity care for people that are struggling.
because it doesn't matter if the doctor is trained if there's nowhere for them to send
They can't
a patient that needs
There's no
higher
referral to
level of
make.
care. Then
So let's get happier. It's the holiday season.
Anyways.
Let's move
Come
on
on,
a little
let's
bit.
get happier.
Let's get happier. Sing us something, John. Do something.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas.
Love it. Thank you, man.
I understand it may snow.
We might get snow. I heard that.
Yeah.
Yes.
When?
On Thursday next week. Yeah.
So what does failure mean to you? And in your mind, as a result of failure, really, what is next? Like, what comes of all of this? So the definition of failure, I think, is simple, obviously, right? The lack of success. Okay, great. I like this one a lot better. The omission of expected or required action. And also the lack of success or inability to meet an expectation. These are kind of pieces when you start thinking about this topic that we have that people, God, I think it's a terrifying thing that people struggle with, like, the fear of failure. John, what did you say when I told you this was the topic?
I don't know. I said I was an expert at it.
Yes.
Or something. I've done it many times.
Because we've all experienced massive amounts
I'm good at
of
it.
this. That was what you said.
I'm good at it.
Right? We and you better get good at it because you're going to
Yeah.
experience it all the time. And I think that this is a topic that I hope people tune into because it doesn't have to determine your path, but unfortunately, I think it determines many people's path before they even choose a path.
Yeah.
Think about that. I think failure, that's a quote, Neil. I think failure, unfortunately, chooses people's paths before they choose a path.
themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's bad. Like, we like quotes to be positive, don't we, Neil? But I don't know if that's a positive thing. We can
Maybe we
amend it.
shouldn't write that one. That one
Well,
down.
it's, but think about what that's
Yeah.
saying, because do you want to subscribe to that, or what do you do? What do you do instead? Let me open up to your thoughts, guys, both of you. What you're thinking with this idea of failure and this topic, and how should we tackle it?
I mean, I think in order to have some sort of success, failure is needed. I feel like failure is how you learn. Failure can be how you navigate things. I don't know. if
Good
I'm making
stuff.
it- Yeah.
Off the
Well,
cuff.
Yeah.
We were taught, and my parents were very good. I'm from southeastern Kentucky originally, and so we kind of got this idea: if we didn't have bad luck, we'd have no luck at all. That's sort of a mindset, unfortunately, fatalistic. But failure is something that we were taught. Well, that wasn't an option. Basically, you had to be perfect, and the problem with that is if you have to be perfect, you're afraid to venture forth
Yeah.
and to think that somehow there was a sense of morality that was put into failure, that somehow with that imperfection you somehow let other people down, you let yourself down, you let your family down, you let your friends down.
Yeah.
And so you're very hypercritical. And I think a lot of people deal with that, or used to. I don't know if they do now.
No.
How
I mean,
much
I definitely
criticism
still
gets
see it.
thrown around the world today?
Yeah.
People are throwing their opinions around. People are speaking through a screen. People are directly criticizing your view,
Oh, how you look?
how you look.
How you sound.
If you're, you got to be, can't be skinny enough. With,
It's
TikTok.
incessantly like we have we turned into like children on the playground in the adult world
Yeah.
nowadays. Yeah, I'm listening to
Well,
what you're
people
saying, John.
people can't. They won't. Responsible people won't run for office because they're afraid that they're going to be destroyed.
Yeah.
Because they might have had a problem. They might have had a failure.
right.
Or something
in the past.
in
yeah.
the past, and they feel like they don't want to put their family through that. They don't want to put
It's
themselves
interesting that
through
you
it.
say that. My mind immediately goes to Herschel Walker, who just ran, and I don't know how much we didn't talk a lot about this dissociative identity disorder, which is a thing, DID, that he is well known and in the public's eye for having gone through and lived
Brave
through. And
enough to talk about it.
The courage that he showed to be honest about that. And then you're right. I'll throw props to run in office, given that history. And it's been 20, 25 years, in his wake. But that stuff still is, that comes with you.
And you may not agree with him politically or anything of that sort. And that's understandable. But do a dog pile on him because he actually was honest enough to talk about his failure.
Right. Listen to these quotes. There's a lot of things out there that you'll hear in motivational circles, and I thought some of these were pretty cool. And there's a stamp we have, or what do you call it, a link that you can go and check these out. 30 powerful quotes on failure. This was from Forbes. So failure isn't fatal, but failure to change might be. John Wooden. I'm not sure who he is, but I suck at that game. Huh? UCLA basketball coach. Cool.
Yeah.
Success is most often achieved by those who don't know that failure is inevitable. I love that one.
Coco Chanel.
Okay. Only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly. Our good buddy Robert F. Kennedy. Giving up is the only sure way to fail. Gina Showalter. And when you take risks, you learn that there will be times when you succeed and there will be times when you fail, but both are equally important. Ellen Miss DeGeneres. I've not failed. I've just found 8,000 ways that won't work. I love Tom Edison.
I love that quote from
Right?
Thomas Edison. I had that up for my kids at school as part of like resiliency.
Oh, yeah.
Is that.
Right?
Yeah.
Pain is temporary. Quitting lasts forever. Lance Armstrong. And my favorite guy with 2 quotes. I gave him 2. Mr. Winston Churchill.
And I'll give you a third one.
You give a third one?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And my favorite Winston Churchill quote is, if you're going through hell, then keep going. Right? What's the third?
Well, the third is an anecdotal, but he was speaking before a boys' school, and it's something like Eton or something like that, and he was the prime minister, and it was during the Blitz, and he he got up and he spoke to the students, and all he said was, "Never get up." Sat back down, waited a second, got back up and said, "Never give up." Waited a couple of seconds, got back down, did that a third time, never give up. And that was the whole point. You don't give up. Failure is written in the cake, and you've just got to be able to make the best of it. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Want
Okay,
to
I
shout
like
out
it,
to some
yeah.
of our Facebook people here. We got Barbara. Good to see you again, ma'am. What a topic, says Cass. And Eric, nice to see you, man. I'm gonna give a shout out. He's my brother-in-law, actually. He says maybe he didn't shoot himself. That there is a lot more to this story, which is interesting. We'll see. I guess it is very fresh.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
there's
yeah,
always.
it is.
So thank you very much.
I'm not claiming to know all the information. That's just the information that has been put out so far.
But it's a leading
nevertheless, it is a heartbreaking. I mean, it does bring about a issue of.
What's the leading cause of death of many young men, particularly is suicide.
And if those facts aren't together yet or out, then we do know that the suicide rates have gone up, anxiety's gone up, depression's gone up.
Well, they
substance
say,
abuse gone
last
up.
I've heard, I could be incorrect, is that women attempt more, but men are more successful because they use things like firearms.
Oh, can I catch you in something real time?
Yeah, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong.
I really do want to correct you in something if I can, and it's something that this is a cool moment, Victoria, that I think you'll take with you for a long time.
Okay.
And it's not a criticism; it's just helping.
No,
you
I mean,
to
make sure I
identify.
have the correct information. Go for it.
I said exactly the same words.
Yeah.
And literally, a student that I was working with stopped me, like I just did you, and she said, "Okay, well, Chris, listen, you know, it's known that my dad was a victim with suicide and struggled with that, and she said, you don't want to say that it was a successful suicide attempt.
Okay.
Instead, it's really that a suicide attempt was completed.
Was completed.
Right.
Okay, changing that terminology.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it caught me in my heart when she helped me understand.
No,
that and
I think
see
that's
that
great.
differently.
Yeah.
Because we it's never.
I mean,
a
not great, but I
success.
think you
It's
make
important.
a valid point. Yeah, and very important.
It's very.
I will definitely
important.
take that with me.
Yeah, I'll do that for the rest of my career.
Yeah.
What a gift she gave me.
Right.
To know.
And I'm wondering too, and I agree with you about that. There's more attempts with females, and with males that they complete it
Right.
more often. But I think a lot of times males don't reach out for help.
That is
And
another aspect.
They
Yeah.
stuff it, and in my old school that I taught at, University of Louisiana at Monroe, we had a suicide cluster, and they were all young males. And then you started seeing it spread to adult males.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the business school.
I
So
think
here's the thing. Let me get us back on
Okay.
track with these
I was
quotes
gonna say, I think
that are
it's.
cool.
I think I was gonna tie that
Okay,
the
go
whole
ahead.
thing back into failure. Is that I think a lot of times it has to do with the fact that the reason maybe that men don't speak or don't speak up as much is because it'll be seen as a failure, or that they failed at life, or that they, failed at whatever it may be, and so then therefore they choose not to reach out or whatever the case may be. I think it can be circled back and connected back to the topic of failure.
It does. It absolutely is. And I listen. I love these motivational programs, thoughts, quotes, philosophies. I think they're great. I use them as an uplifting thing. Like literally, when I was reading them, it brought me out of the doldrums that I was in, talking about our current event that we talked about. Right. So they are wonderful. But the problem that I have is that I feel like it can very much miss a point. That is. I'm curious what you would nod about, John. You're nodding.
Well, I was
strong
wondering where
agreement.
you were going because I was thinking. My mind went to the idea of the creatives, the the artist that commits suicide, or the
Yeah.
and a lot of times they are not considered successes, and they think of themselves as failures. I'm thinking of Van Gogh. I'm thinking of Sylvia Plath, who commit suicide, or they how we complete it, the suicide.
Right.
Yeah, and they go to their graves feeling like they
Failures.
don't failures because they're told that, because they do something very different.
So my question is, what is missing when we have such struggle that is part of the human emotional experience that we're trying to figure out together? See how
Yeah.
I think of that very poignantly. We're figuring this out together, guys. And the thing is, these motivational quotes are awesome, but lacking, because how do we get from where I'm at now, feeling, keyword, what I'm feeling, and then to where you're talking about keep on going through hell, or any one of these other quotes and phrases and philosophies that motivational people will provide. There's a great gap between the two.
Well,
Right.
you think of Lincoln and Winston Churchill. They both they were dogged by blackness. They
Hard.
was and just depression.
Yeah.
And difficulty, and yet there was something in them that kept them motivated to go on, and so that they could give quotes that are good. But to spout it off like, and I'm going to be critical, Anthony Robbins, for example, does the, or we have the Lakewood Ranch guy, who's
Lakewood Ranch.
No, not Lakewood. Church, that's in Houston, Texas. Your best now and all that is very positive. Pardon? Anyway,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Yeah.
But
anyway, that idea of just, if you just think positively, everything's going to work out.
Yeah.
And make a quick solution.
And ironically, we're going to
Sorry.
talk today throughout, like, what do you do? You'll hear a lot of the same things, which is funny that you said that, because you know where my mind went? One of the most influential books I read as a child, which was Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking. Right? Very influential in my youth, and probably directed me somewhat to this whole field, to be honest with you. I don't want to be too dramatic, but it was that powerful to me.
But there was some depth to that. I had met him.
Did you?
Before.
Awesome.
Yeah, and he had a very difficult. His early years in the 30s were very difficult.
Right.
And so he was able to. So he applied that. So there was some context. It just
Okay.
Yeah.
He was speaking from
He's
his
speaking from a genuineness,
experience.
and I think that's the difference. When people, with some of these aphorisms or whatever, some of them do have depth because it comes from, like Edison. He was bullied and beaten, and he was deaf and thrown off a train, and just horrible things when he was starting out and to become an inventor. And something within him motivated him to keep going.
Powerful.
Yeah.
So we want to go between the gap a little bit on what gets us to the point where these people that really lived those experiences have found a way. What did they find, right?
Right.
How did they get there? What do we do to fight through this horrible, fear-mongered experience of failure? What came to me is really, expressing and understanding and beginning to get in touch with what it means to you. It's the therapy question in me, Victoria, right?
Yeah.
What does failure mean to you? If you ask yourself that question, and I want to give everybody that hears this episode a challenge to ask yourself that question and just ponder it for a little bit, and see what you come up with. Because what you message to yourself determines a lot of how you're experiencing, this 10,000 ways to not accomplish what Thomas Edison, is trying for. It can, Victoria, I would submit to you that the way that you identify what failure means to you determines if you develop internal resiliency or internal self terror
Destruction.
and destruction. Yeah. Right?
Right. No, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think, the ability to create some resiliency within yourself is do or die sometimes, and whether or not you thrive or off of failure, or if you let failure
Stop you.
succumb you. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing from you is that's a good counseling term. But we're in the wellness
Right.
part of counseling, so we look less at more in terms of as important as diagnosis is. We talk about wholeness and wellness,
Right.
and part of that wheel of wellness is that emotional developing resiliency and that psychological toughness, and also that emotional toughness, and yet keeping one's empathy and self-care.
Right.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's also something that can be. I think it's something that personally can be taught.
Oh, we're learning.
Like with clients and stuff.
Absolutely.
I think that is, if that is the goal that someone would like to achieve, long term or whatever. Like, I think that is very doable within
Come see
therapy.
Victoria in therapy.
Yeah, come see me in therapy.
Right? For real. Like, this is
But
a
yeah,
big-
I mean, that's what I mean. But then if you let yourself get bogged down with the failure, that's where.
Now, if you want to find out about purpose, you talk to me.
Yes, go
And
find John.
John for existentialism.
Yeah.
Oh dear, I don't know what I got. I got to come back to it. So I thought about this. What does failure mean to you? And if you think about what the goal was that you were going after,
Right.
and you ask yourself what that goal means to you, you'll track back to what you're experiencing with that failure. And more on that in a little bit is some foreshadowing. But to add to the challenge of asking yourself, what does failure mean to you? A question to ask that is helpful along those lines, I think, is what am I really wanting here anyways, right? Like an example, a failed marriage, okay? Or failing on a weight goal, right? Or failing on a long-term bike ride. Each one of those things are different goals that you might interpret failure about. And it is a lack of success. It didn't meet expectations. They can very easily be called failures. I have no problem with identifying that things are failures. But what each one of those things different means to you, obviously, a weight goal means health or appearance or attractiveness. Well, so what does failure mean to you in that is going to be very different than a failed bike ride, where
Right.
it's more your health or more an accomplishment.
Or endurance.
Endurance or failed marriages, right? You see how that moves around for you? So when you're really dealing with this failure that has occurred, look at what the goal was. What are you really wanting here? And then circle back to how do you determine, do I accept that failure or do I get back on the bike? Right?
Yeah.
Because you can
if
still go after what you wanted in the
I
first
think
place.
the bike is a wonderful example because if you stopped
I did
after
it.
the first time, everybody falls off the bike.
Yes.
Everybody. And
Not
when you get
metaphoric, it's
those,
real.
the training wheels, once those training wheels go off, you're gonna fall. And one of the things is are you someone that will get back on that bike again and keep doing it?
And there's some people that have never ridden a bike, John.
Because of their fear
Yep.
of failing.
I don't want to learn.
Yeah.
I'm
wanna
afraid to
fall.
fall off. Yep.
And so you really do help. And oftentimes, by the way, this is unplanned, but with this metaphor, we could just go on and on with it. Don't you need encouragement? Right? How important is encouragement in your goals? Right?
Yeah.
Don't you need some lessons? Don't you need some support? I taught my kids how to ride a bike. And there were things that we did to make it safe, but to encourage them and to also let them fail. I didn't prevent them from falling. They had to fall. There's a lot of things there.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of
I
things there.
wiped out a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And ended up with scrapes.
Going right here in my forehead. If you
But the
Black
important
eyes.
thing is that you got back up and that you continue to try again.
How do we get to that? So let's go further with that. And before we start to get geared into like more of the dealing with your feelings of it, which again is foreshadowing. I think that we really need to kind of take a pause and recognize that there's also a very important task when you experience a failed marriage, or when you experience a failed goal for health, or you experience a failed financial venture, right? There's a loss here.
Yeah.
And if you don't tend to the grieving of a loss, can you not find yourself in a stuck space?
Yeah, possible. Yeah.
So we think of grieving when somebody dies, but I know we know there's a whole lot more that goes into that.
Yeah.
So run just for a little bit, either of you, on grief and loss and why that's important, and just like how we do that. For a quick segment.
Okay.
On
Very
this important
quickly,
component.
there's grieving, and I'm thinking in terms of men, obviously,
Yeah.
because I'm
Man.
You're a dude.
I'm my sex, right? But if you've ever lost a job, and that your whole sense of your well-being and your image and your success is called up into that, and you're asked, somebody comes up to you and says, John, you're not quite making it and cutting it, and it's time for you to think about moving on. Devastating, just devastating, gut-rending, because you feel like you've let people down. You're embarrassed.
Didn't do my primary function.
Didn't do my primary function, of which I was built for.
Right.
The way I was created to be. And let's say you do it in something, because I've had that happen to me in the ministry years ago. And it was very difficult. And there was some hostility that was going on with the session, the church session, because they had to find and identify a bad guy. And so this is why this is not working at the church. Therefore, it's time to move on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let me take another gender.
Very
thing. I'm a
emasculating.
dude too,
Yeah.
but I know, Victoria, you can speak to being a new mom. How many women struggle with the failure of, birthing?
Oh my God.
When you have a miscarriage and
Yeah.
and the powerful experiences of a fundamental thing that, and this is horrible, women, I want to say before I even utter this out loud, like, this is not your fault. You are not doing a poor
Right.
job with your health and causing this to occur. And I know that's a common
And
belief
ironically,
people have,
I did think about motherhood as you were talking about that, is like when someone feels like that their sole purpose in life is to be a mom
Yeah.
and to be a mother, and for some reason either that's not able to happen either before birth or even in things that happen after birth, that gets taken away, like that is just utter failure,
Right.
like, or considered other failure, and like to recover from that takes a lot. Yeah, but it is important.
Miscarriages, stillborn children, and
Tough issue.
Tough issue. The mom and the father. A lot of times, you have, and they say, well, chaplain, I need you to baptize my baby because I
Oh,
worry
dear, that
about
would
him
be tough.
going into heaven. And you get this mass of somebody that's got skin slip and just falling apart. And you see the mother. You give the nurse gives the child to the mother to hold, even though the baby is and there was this sense of grief and wonder and love that's there. And so for a mother to go through that, or a father to go through that as well,
Right.
it's just
It's heartbreaking.
yeah. And
It
how
was one of the toughest things I went through
and
personally, yeah.
yeah. And if somebody says, well, you can always have another, I mean, that's, God, I can't believe that.
Yeah.
People,
So before you go to the I can have another, or when you have the job loss, John, you're talking about, we have got to prioritize a grieving process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like someone died when you lost your job or whatnot. And this grieving process, it's important because ultimately one of the ways to deal with a failure of what you had, the reason why I thought about grief as a piece of this when I was preparing our process tonight, is because think about it. If you don't grieve, there's a cost in that, and you don't come to a place of ultimately where we're trying to get to with this loss, which is acceptance.
Yeah.
Right? You don't accept that the baby died. You don't accept that the job went away. You don't accept that the weight didn't come off. You don't accept the whatever it is that you're working
bingo.
towards,
And then that's
right?
but then that's how
Bingo.
you move forward is after
Gaining
through that
acceptance, yes.
then you're able to move on forward from that quote unquote failure.
See how this
And
works?
then you're able to tend to other things.
My failure was such yes, it was about me. That's why I said John.
Yeah, I
did
heard
that.
you.
I went on and got my PhD in
Oh,
doctorate
wow.
in counseling.
Yeah.
Counselor, yeah, that's why I went back to school and doors opened.
Right.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
part of that was to go through 2 or 3 months, even 6 months of grieving and going through those stages, which don't necessarily happen sequentially, but
Right.
happen all at
Right.
once or differently or whatever. But going and then being able to say, okay, I'm going to put one foot forward and I'm going to try something new.
You have to have permission in your mind in order to deal with failure by doing a grieving experience. Then you arrive at acceptance of the loss. Then you can get into what further is going on with your emotional self. So let's move to, what then happens. So you get to a place of acceptance like you did, John. And this is where, even without talking further about some of what we're going to discuss with that, look at what happened in just dealing with the grief and loss and getting your doctorate degree and becoming the professor that we all know and love today,
The Pope.
the Pope.
The professor and Marianne.
Right?
So yeah.
And all the students that I could just go on. I mean, it's an awesome story. Thank you so much for sharing that because we all have those marked moments in our life that propel us into what it is that we've ultimately achieved success with.
It broke my heart, but it made my heart stronger. My heart
There
may
you go.
break, and then it made me a stronger person, made me a better person.
Don't we grow stronger from a broken spot? The metaphor, but also the truth of a broken bone is
Yeah.
the strongest part of that bone when it heals.
Exactly.
If you're struggling with a marriage out there and feel broken, if you're struggling with bankruptcy out there and feeling broken, if you're struggling with a lost child, whatever it might be that is deemed failure, there's a lot of hope in what it is that we're talking about here, right? So let's deal with these feelings and thrust forward towards your inevitable success,
Yes.
right? So when you deal with the grief, it's part of the same thing, but, I know it's the therapist in me again, a segment here of tending to the feelings of the matter. I mean, can we do this without dealing with the emotional content that's in the air?
No.
Right?
The answer is no.
And this goes, thank you for that, Victoria, right? And this goes directly from the gap, right? So I told you, we foreshadowed before. You hear these awesome quotes, you hear these amazing people doing amazing things, saying amazing stuff, and it's kind of like, okay, well, I feel like shit, so where am I at and how do I get there? Well, the way that you get there is by dealing with the emotional content that's in place. I'm sorry for anybody who wants to avoid that. You're really going to have to go through that. There is no way to avoid that. Is that a fair set of statements?
Yes, AKA you have to feel your feelings.
Right? Don't think there's any way around it.
Yeah.
And if you
I feel like a broken record sometimes in sessions saying that.
Do you?
Like you have to feel your feelings. I mean, and we've talked about before how your feelings aren't always valid and true, and sometimes your feelings can lie to you and blah 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 blah. But still, you still have to then identify what you're actually feeling and feel those things so that you can move forward.
And I think a big part of that is, what are you feeling?
Identifying feelings, yes.
Right? That's where we start. So when you go through a loss, I really think that one of the important things is to identify, wait a minute, what really is going on for me? We had a conversation, Victoria, to blow up the feelings chart. You remember that? I know.
I roll. I'm rolling my eyes so significantly right
It's
now.
a thing, though, because people are stuck on happy, mad, glad, or sad. But what you can do is you can talk with people and you can make connections to open up and figure out they will objectively be able to feed this back to you. Because listen to some of these things. I was thinking about what is it that I'm feeling when you're dealing with losses, and actually I'm out of order. I think because hold on a minute. Let me get geared in. No, I am right. Yeah, I just got goofed up. Sorry. Developing the idea of understanding what it is that you're feeling when you go through a loss. You may feel isolated. You didn't realize it, but somebody can talk to you and feel like geared into seeing, hey, you've really shut down since this happened, and you're alone. You're feeling isolated. You reach out. You can help. People can help see that with you. A heart crush, right? When you experience again the grief and the loss, in a relationship where you got stood up or turned away or it got shut down, you're going to be dealing with a level of disappointment. Business owners out there, you will have failures all over the place when you start businesses.
70 or 80% of all businesses fail. And what's
Right.
the difference? An entrepreneur succeeds finally after keep doing it over and over and over again, trying different things.
I can speak to that in personal experience, right? The disappointment though is overwhelming, and you have to fight through that valley of despair that comes into the air when you go through a failure and reach to the other side of dealing through that disappointment. It might be just hurt feelings, right? It could be just feeling criticized. We talked about that before. And part of the goal is developing, a sense of grace for yourself, a sense of belonging, getting back in touch with
self-acceptance.
Self-acceptance, positive self-talk. There's a lot of these things that fly around. Basically, if you've listened to these shows, you hear about how to handle your emotions, and you want to employ that directly after you grieve the loss when a failure occurs.
Right.
Right? Powerful process that oftentimes is unfortunately avoided. Right? And let's go to the next step with this. A lot of times it's avoided because of the fear.
The big word,
Right?
fear. The big F word.
It
Or another,
just-
I guess the other big F word, failure and fear.
It's crushing. Failure and fear go directly hand to hand
Yeah.
together.
Like mentioned in episode 72.
And that's where we talked about
that you were in, but not us.
yeah, Craig and I did. Thank you. Check that out. Episode 72 is Fear Your Friend or Foe. And Craig and I had an awesome conversation about that in episode 72 because we don't have enough time to spend on it today. But
Right.
if you don't deal with that fear, it is going to become your foe. I think we can just land there and say that. And again, it's my favorite quote I wanted to put at this point. If you're going through hell, and you're feeling all these things, what is that hell? Despair, loss, hurt, criticized, overwhelmed, fearful. That if you just keep going,
Yeah.
that Mr. and Mrs. Young Man graduating from school, going to college and struggling your freshman year, if you just keep going and take the next small step, then you do get through.
I'm trying to imagine you as a freshman.
Oh, dear God, it was a rough year.
Well,
Yeah.
he showed me
John-
a picture from his early days.
I
and
did,
one of
actually.
his career today. He's like a completely different person. So I just imagine like a younger version of that. He'll have to show you one day.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
It's
But,
it's.
let's
put
I
it-
would get homesick.
Well, that's what I struggle with, John. You're absolutely right. So my first year, freshman year, it was one of the 2 times that I really experienced homesickness, and it crushed me. I really was on the floor and had just a super hard time. And I'll never forget talking to my mom on the phone, kind of wailing and bawling, just tearful, and exclaiming, "What am I going to do?" And it was I lost my scholarship, I think, when my grades weren't great. And so, well, I guess I could sell my car. And I remember just expounding that. And it was like, Oh, it was a mess.
Yeah.
And I had to deal with that grieving of losing my scholarship and getting back on track with what I knew I could do. Because my sophomore year in high school, I have a whole story about the honors biology class that I took, and I got an A, and I was able to figure out, holy crap, like I can do good in academics. And I got better and better and better. But my freshman year, I fell and fail. And then I was able to kind of recover that. And hey, I graduated magna cum laude.
Good for you.
It's a decent success.
I had a cousin who said, "Well, you graduated magna cum laude." I mean, he's the lawyer, but
Yeah, this fits perfectly right now. We get some Facebook help from some response. Your attitude after failure will determine a positive or negative life lesson.
that needs to be put in on that paper.
Yeah. Who
That's-
said that?
That's wonderful.
That's our Facebook friend. And again, I'll repeat it. Your attitude after failure will determine a positive or negative life lesson. It's an awesome quote. So, what are we doing with mindset? Let's go a little further beyond the fear. And we're talking about it a little bit. So, if you grieve, and then you deal with the emotions after you identify them, you might need help with that. And then, how do we get through to a growth mindset? I actually asked my kid about this. He's all into sales right now. He's all into motivational thinking. Huh?
The one I assaulted yesterday?
Yeah, you met my son. Yeah. So, what do you guys think? How do we get a growth mindset?
How do you develop a growth mindset? Practice.
I think you have to keep it, like you said,
Yeah.
keep at it, because that's what I think the world sometimes, and I say world in a vague way, but in a sense that there's an expectation for doesn't want to see you succeed, and there's that attitude that can kill your spirit. And so one thing you have to develop is that sense that I'm going to keep putting one foot ahead of myself. I don't have to be there 100% at the goal. You know, if you're doing an exercise, if you're working out at the gym, where I see a lot of people fail, I guess I kind of stay at the gym too often, but
You're my hero.
you get up there and they want to put the Stairmaster at 20 and they get started
Practically
falling off. You can't do that.
Right.
Nobody
Right.
can do that. You have to start at a
Well, and I use a lot of, because I mean, I love growth mindset, obviously working with kids and stuff.
Yeah.
But like, a lot of it is just utilizing like stop and think. Like when it comes to your verbiage and the things that you're saying,
you're helping them already. You're helping them succeed by having that growth mindset. You're inculcating that into those young minds.
Right.
Those skulls full of mush. When
yeah.
you're giving them that.
Yeah.
And so in a way, as people that are educators or counselors, we need to be able to do that.
You know,
I
it's
guess I do
interesting.
a lot
Let
of
me-
like demonstrating.
So it's not just the person.
You're right, John. Let me get back to Victoria to highlight that because I didn't think about this and you triggered a thought, right?
Yeah.
Stop. Is it okay to stop
Yeah.
for a moment when you fail? Because you said stop and think. Go further.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I basically, the way I teach stop and think is that, you know, you stop, think, and then the third part of it is act or follow through or whatever. And I'll encourage people like, okay, I usually ask people like, what do you think of when you think of the word stop? Do you think of like a stop sign? Do you think of like a hand being put up? Do you think of like a red light? Do you think of like, what do you think of?
You stop in the name of love.
Oh, dear goodness.
And then I get them to work on imagining that when they encounter a situation or a feeling and think about like what would happen if I did this? What happened if I did that?
So you're talking a little REBT, CBT kind of stuff too, aren't you?
Yeah.
REBT, CBT, HIK, and what?
Okay.
Yeah.
yes.
And,
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
But I mean that's kind of how I teach it, and like that it's okay. And a lot of times I encourage people to do it on everyday tasks, just to get their brain like used to like, even though it's something that you consciously like or unconsciously do, naturally to like get yourself to stop and think. And I think it's okay to remind people to take that pause. It's okay that if you drop a glass and it shatters everywhere, stop, take a deep breath. It's okay. Like, you know what to do. Avoid the glass, go pick up the like broom.
And I
then
love
try
this,
again.
right? Because, John, you're right. We do this in cognitive behavioral therapy and reactive attachment theory and RET. What RET is
REBT.
All right, rational emotive.
rationally emotive therapy. Yes, I was thinking reality therapy.
But
Anyway,
no, it's
there's-
reality therapy.
It is
It
reality.
is.
It's a
Do
form
that
of
too.
reality therapy. So there's different things that we do because people need help to kind of get through when you've been punched in the face. And that's what a failure can represent. But you'll find that a lot of times with motivational people, they don't talk about the stop. It's like, no, get up and go. And that's and to a certain extent, it's important to stop, as you just explained. Pause, recover, grieve, identify your emotions. Let me tell you something. As an entrepreneurial person, I find this in these circles a lot, where we get unrealistic thought process about how people get through. What did you say, John? One of these people that struggled with the darkness, not Winston, but somebody else.
Well, it's
Lincoln.
Lincoln.
Okay,
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln.
He
got
fought
through-
a war.
Got through this darkness. Got through this depression. That didn't happen by like, boom, just stand up, back up. Right? It's
Right.
an unrealistic thing that people struggle trying to think that's what they're supposed to do. So stop, think, deal with the emotions.
Use
grieve.
that
It's
as a
good.
gift. Think of if you could reframe it and think in terms that failure
Sure.
is a gift.
Oh yeah, we know that, and people talk about that. But before you can get to the gift part,
Yeah, you have to stop.
you have to stop. You have to grieve. You have to identify what it is that you're feeling with this, what it means to you, and some of the things we're talking about, so that you can then re-engage. It is at times. Is it a true statement to say when you are dealing with a significant failure in your life that you're just going to immediately re-engage?
I think that's foolishness if you do that.
Think of a marriage.
Yeah.
When you're crushed in what I think anecdotally is one of the worst spaces you could be in, and you think, I just need to get right back on the saddle. Like,
When I work with couples that, sometimes it's the man, sometimes it's the woman, and they say they keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and they've had all their prior relationships fail. Well, what they've done is they've gone back into it with both feet and they do it blindly without having to say, okay, I need to grieve for this. I need to think about this. I need to seek
Good point.
pardon?
That's a good point.
Yeah, to seek the counsel of wise people, So,
yes.
and
Which, as we say a lot of times on the show, when you're dealing with these types of things, seek the counsel of wise people. Man, don't do these failures alone. I mean, if you're a business leader, get with other business leaders. If you're in a church, get with other pastors and talk about what it is that you're dealing with. If you're in an ivory tower in a CEO office, you're a business leader, you've got to be talking about these things.
Kiwanis Club, Rotary, Toastmasters, all these are predicated on people failing and learning from their common mistakes.
Yes.
That's like my dad is in. He actually does that. He does. He is in a group of other business leaders who they literally travel from like each city to city, and they help. They basically like help the company get ready for like when the owner like steps down and like retires. And,
Okay,
like,
yeah, they're a
and,
transition
like,
team.
Yeah, and so, but they work together. Like, I think he was just in like Kansas City or something like that. Like with another, like with it was that week's, and like soon it'll be his company's week here, like in the Charlotte area, and like the team, like the whole group will come in and they'll like sit down and they'll kind of evaluate and they'll like prepare for that stuff and like kind of walk through like how do you transition properly and like what are the best options, like who is the best person to, and like.
And what's funny is mental health is right in the middle of
Yeah.
that. Right.
Because I mean, then you have people who's like the businesses are pretty normal and things are pretty smooth, but then you have other ones where it's like a crazy house and there's like all sorts of drama and stuff going on. But then they use each other to like work through like problems and those failures and those things.
So it's like
I can't remember the name of it, but
a movable support group.
yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
There's a mastermind group. Is that what you're thinking of?
No,
because that's part
they
of what
have
mastermind groups are.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of something like that, but they have their own name to it.
So
I can't
real quick
remember what
on
it is,
developing a growth mindset, Rake. I was talking about it, like I said, with my son. It was cool, and some of this is he was brainstorming with me. What is your why? Mm-hmm. Realizing that's what a lot of people talk about. Why are you doing what you're doing? Examining your motivation. Again, similarly, why are you doing what you're doing? Really, why are you doing it? If it's a good goal, then reconstitute that goal after you've had a failure. Defeating the negative self, being mindful of the negative self-talk that just blows up. Purposefully, listen, oh my God, this is a whole show, I know, but purposely develop specifically with purpose hopefulness. Like focus on the vision that you're developing your goal of moving towards. How will I be when I lose these 40 pounds? How will I be when we are reconstituted in this marriage? How will I be when I develop my next company, right? Like those are important
So
pieces
visualize
of feeling good.
it.
Visualizing, have the vision. People also ask really like, are you happy and content? Being mindful about the dangers that contentment create is a cautionary tale, because we can get comfortable when you fail and you reconcile and you accept, and we could do a whole thing on the dangers that getting into a comfortable, safe space can create for you. Well, I've just bought new pants, so I don't really need to lose the weight. Mm-hmm. Or I've just gotten a loan with my debt, so it covered the business expenses. We could just stand pat. We've recovered, right? So be careful about what contentment can do in addition to developing, the growth mindset and the myth of safety. Do you think we've helped people develop what I hope is a hopeful way of developing an attitude at really tough times that people are having? Because we need to taxi in for a landing.
Well, yeah, and I think especially now with the holiday season,
right?
I think this is a good topic to have around that, because a lot of people do feel like they experience a lot of failure with family and with loved ones and relationships around the holiday season. And the holiday season can bring up a lot
what
of
it should be, and
Yeah.
you think it should be congruent with your childhood memories,
right,
Yeah.
or yeah, and
which
so
are not never happen.
and a lot of things can be triggering. And I mean, I had a client tell me today that they don't really like using the word triggering because they feel like it's overused.
It's way
but
overused.
like a lot of things can be sensitive or gaslighting when it comes to the holidays. And so I think it's important to, as we are in the midst of the holiday season, remembering that like failures happen, but we can move forward from failures. Like we don't have to be stuck in them.
Well said, my good friend Victoria. Let me take us out of here with the idea of letting you know, listen, we really have a lot of things, as Victoria was just going on in today's day and age around the world, that you can get caught and stuck with the failure space that you're in, whether it be with a war, whether it be with losing your house, my gosh, losing your companion, your compadre, your job, your finances, your status, your office. My goodness, Ukraine is facing losing their country. So there's lots of powerful failures and small failures that you have from day-to-day living. There is hope. This is the season of renewal as we get into the new year, and I want you to have a sense of how do we go about this, because these motivational quotes, these motivational thoughts really are uplifting, and they're uplifting because that's where you get to when you work through identifying the feelings that you're having, the grief experience that you have, and the mindset of growth that you can create from really tough spots that you find yourself in today. So again, hope the holiday season is going well for you. We're going to ride them through as much as we can with the crazy schedules, but we're here, and we'll be wishing you a New Year's very soon. Take care, and we'll see you next week.
Blessings. Bye-bye.